whole on May 22nd, 2024 at 7:02 p.m. The first item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is roll call.
Good evening, everyone. Alder Allen. Present. Mayor Arata Frada.
Here.
Alder Dantzler.
Here.
Alder Gerhardt.
Here.
Alder Herbst.
Here. 1 or 2 stop.
Alder Jetzer.
Here.
Alder Maldonado has indicated he's delayed. Alder Vafadari. And Alder Wheeler is absent with excuse.
Moving on to the next item is approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes, so I'd like a motion on the draft minutes of March 20th, 2024.
Move approval.
Second.
Any questions, comments?
I don't remember why we delayed last time.
The
I
minutes
think it-
were not included, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I think it was
Okay.
just not on the agenda.
I didn't see anything out of place.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item, can I get a motion on the draft minutes for April 24th, 2024?
I'll move approval.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor. I have one small friendly amendment under number 8. The motion to adjourn, Allen is spelled wrong. Anything else?
I respond to a lot of different things.
We can take that as a friendly, I assume.
Yes.
Great. All in favor of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item, we have a presentation with the Fitchburg Chamber Visitor and Business Bureau. Welcome.
Should have asked, can I see the screen or the presentation or not?
It should appear on the monitor up there.
Oh, like,
There's one on the desk, yeah. You should
Oh.
be able to.
sorry.
Do you want to, while we're getting that set up, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I think I'm speaking to the choir here, but I'm Angela Kinderman. I'm the executive director of the Fitchburg Chamber Visitor and Business Bureau. And we are the tourism entity for Fitchburg. And so I was here to give kind of an update on hoping to kind of refresh people's memory about what we do and our partnership with the city, and then kind of let you know about a couple of new activities this year. I can.
And we have a couple of items. There is a Visit Fitchburg guide that we've been given,
sure.
and also a Summer in Fitchburg magnet,
Just seeing if I can pull this up here myself.
which is pretty.
Okay, that's okay.
Looks like we got some good events coming up.
Yeah, so I can just talk, talk a little bit here about what we do as the Visitor Bureau for Fitchburg. Our role is to promote, market, and inform and create in Fitchburg. We promote the brand of Fitchburg, our businesses, and our tourism assets. We work to attract families and individuals to Fitchburg to increase our tourism and economic activity. We use the room tax as part of our funding, and it's designed, room tax statewide, is designed to provide revenue for tourism promotion and marketing. So we serve as the city's Visitors Bureau. There it is. How do I switch? How do we get this over? Every time you guys have new...
You just let me know and I'll move through the slide.
Okay. You can move again. So we serve as the city's visitor bureau. We build relationships within the city and outside the city to support programming that make an economic impact in our community. We create and distribute marketing materials and campaigns that highlight Fitchburg's assets and amenities. And then we work with our partners to support assets and create assets that continue to not only attract visitors, but enhance the quality of life here for our citizens. Years ago, when we worked with the Forward Fitchburg, and we had worked with a lot of different partners, we decided to focus on 3 areas for tourism, and that was our brand extension, kind of promoting the brand of Fitchburg beyond our borders. We usually focus on like a 5-state region. We also focus on corporate development, and that might include support for our businesses that want to bring and host events here or meetings. And then, of course, leisure development, which is what most people think of when they think of tourism. So with brand extensions, these are just a few of the things that we do. But for example, we produce our community guide, which is really popular. We print 18,000 copies of those every year. They're distributed not only in the city, but kind of around with our businesses, hotels, visitors. That's also provided digitally. We are very popular the Berg maps, so biking opportunities in Fitchburg, that's a big part of our brand. Those maps we produce at least 2,500, if not more, a year. Seems like we're doing more each year. We also have a monthly newsletter, visit fitchburg.com, and I encourage you, if you don't receive that newsletter, to sign up. It's a wealth of information. It comes out once a month, and it really keeps you up to date each month about what's going to happen in Fitchburg, whether it's events, promotions, things to do. It's a great read. We have over 4,000 opt-in subscribers right now, and that grows quite a bit each month. We average between 30 and 50 press mentions a year, whether that's through press releases or attraction that we get from our events or campaigns. About 35 online media outlets, so we make sure that online outlets are updated all the time with Fitchburg events. Things like Travel Wisconsin, the Isthmus, Destination Madison, places like that, making sure all of our events are there. We have a very large social media engagement and following, and then of course, through that we showcase not only our tourism assets, but our businesses in Fitchburg. Can turn that. Again, this is just an example of some of those places, those outlets that we make sure Fitchburg is featured. Corporate development, sometimes people ask what this means. We serve our businesses by encouraging them to host meetings and events here. This is a nice event that we hosted last year with the Department of Agriculture Tourism. We hosted people from all over the country in Puerto Rico. And at Staybridge Suites, our office provides some grant money oftentimes for these associations to host their events here. And then we also, I would call it kind of a concierge service for meeting planners to help them kind of coordinate their activities and events here in Fitchburg to make the experience the best it can be. We also do quite a bit of marketing and design collateral for the Economic Development Department because, of course, attracting additional businesses to Fitchburg is important. It grows our local economy and our tourism economy. So these are just some examples that we partner with our friends in the Economic Development Department. And then leisure development, we are involved in just, we have our hands in a little bit of everything there. Last year, of course, we were partners with the city and other businesses on bringing B-Cycle here. Concerts at McKee is a series that we produce and is quite popular. We hosted some pickleball tournaments last year and hope to grow those even more as we expand our courts. And we partnered with the city on the Holiday Lights Tour last year. That is a very popular event that I have to give kudos to Lisa Sanford here at the city. She started a few years ago, and the feedback from the residents has been overwhelming, and so we continue to grow that event each year too. Just a few other things in Fitchburg that happen really all year round. We provide support, whether it's financial support, whether it's staff support. Oftentimes it's kind of coordination or organization or helping people find their way through whatever they need to do to be successful to host their events here. And then, of course, we do a lot of marketing for all of that. We serve as Fitchburg's front door. Our chamber, our office is located just down the hill from here. And, of course, the warmer the weather, the more visitors we get. And so the door's been swinging open quite a bit this week already. With people coming in, we make a nice place for people to stop and get information. And we do all this with our partners. These are just a few of our partners, obviously, the City of Fitchburg, FACTv, Destination Madison, Travel Wisconsin, our hotel properties we work closely with, Fitchburg nonprofit Bike Fitchburg. Then these, again, just a few of them. And then, of course, our partners with the businesses in Fitchburg. So this year we've got a few things. Obviously, you guys are familiar with the expanded B-cycle fleet, and we'll be doing some promotion surrounding that. But that's a real asset and a big lift, I know, on the city's part and the businesses that participated. And so, but that, again, overwhelming positive feedback on that effort. The Burby Derby, if you don't know, has been handed off to a new organization, and I strongly encourage everybody to support them. So Try for Schools is now the host of the Burby Derby, and the name is changing to Birdie Derby. So we are helping them kind of navigate this. This will be their first year as the organization runs it. Hi, Joe. So working with those guys. And then we're actually going to grow the Holiday Lights Tour even more. Again, last year, if the feedback is overwhelmingly positive from the residents. And I'm sure you guys know that sometimes the negative feedback comes in easier than the positive. So when we get a lot of positive feedback and people take the time to pick up the phone or send an email, that really kind of tells us, okay, this is something people want. So we are going to continue to host with the city the Holiday Lights Tour, but we're going to kick off the event with a in-person event the Friday night of that weekend, and we will be having a lot of things. The planning's still in the works, but just a few of the things would be like a large holiday tree lighting, carolers, activities for families, obviously free for everyone to attend. So we're looking forward to growing that event even more. I'm really going through this quickly. If you don't follow us on social medias, please do. And I really, again, the visit Fitchburg.com, signing up for our monthly newsletter, it's really well done and a lot of information. I think people are always really surprised about how much we have going on in this community, so it takes some effort to stay on top of things. So that's a good way to do it. Okay, any questions?
Thank you so much for coming. Lots of exciting new things on the horizon. Jay, please go.
Yeah, something that came up in the strategic plan workshop that we had was the idea of what do we want to see in Fitchburg in the future. Mm-hmm. And I know we've talked over the last how many years about trying to create some destination places in Fitchburg. I mean, we have a couple. We have a bowling alley. We have a movie theater. We have a few other things. But how much time has the chamber spent talking about this first? And if there has been significant thought gone into it, what kinds of things do you think we should be working to attract to create more destinations here?
We have talked about it. I think there are some things that might be private sector partnership opportunities that might even be coming to us sometime soon. The way that we're talking about it is, what is our role? We're starting to analyze how do we use our dollars to assist in these projects, and kind of what are the guardrails around that. That's a really vague answer, Jay, but our board does talk about it, and we know there's a need, but I think just given the budgets these days, it has to be a private-public probably a private entity, but maybe there's some opportunity for private-public partnership on it.
Well, I think the real question is in order to pursue these opportunities, you have to first identify them.
Yeah. So certainly sporting, and again, kudos to Fitchburg. You know, I thought I could get away without talking about pickleball tonight. But, you know, putting those 4 courts is no small feat in that will have, at least for now, be the only community with 12 courts in one location. You know, getting that in the budget, that's significant in terms of attraction. That's an asset that people are looking for. It also kind of helps us attract other entities that might be looking in that arena. Like it shows that we're serious about making those sporting opportunities available to not only our visitors but our residents too. So I mean that's an asset, that's a destination. Not sure what else I can say.
Well, I mean, this is one of those things I'd like to, between the city and the chamber and maybe some of our committees, to start brainstorming about, because we've got enough population here now. I mean, when I first got elected, we only had about 18,000 population, but now we've got enough bodies that if we put something, if we put some kind of destination spot, it would definitely attract our residents and hopefully bring people in from other areas to bring, you know, more tourism money into Fitchburg. So I think but the question is, what are those things?
Well, the sports facilities are always in demand, always. Pickleball, futsal, even tennis, you know, doing the tennis courts again, that's another attraction. It really comes down to how the scale, you know, and what we're really trying to attract. So those conversations do need to happen, or that kind of planning. I will say, I guess I can make this, it's not finalized, but our chamber board has voted to start segregating funds for opportunities like that in the future. Obviously, we'd never be a main funder, but it might be, again, we don't have this all finalized yet, but we certainly want to be prepared if an opportunity presents itself to be at least assistance in some way. And usually when people come, you guys know that more than anything, assistance means a check.
Yes.
So there's certainly conversations we're having, but again, it kind of comes down to what's our role, what's the city's role, what are we looking to see, that type of thing. Yeah. I do think there'll be some opportunities coming in the next year or two that maybe we can talk about more, I hope. Sports facilities are always popular and will be. Yeah.
Julia.
So thank you, Angela, and I really like the idea of the Holiday Lights kickoff event.
Good.
So because we have our farmland, I have seen other communities that they are doing like a dinners at the farm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Have you considered doing any of this activity with the chamber and some, we can do like a farm dinner? I don't know. Event?
Well, I mean, Four Winds Farms has, no, we haven't considered it, but it's not something we wouldn't consider.
Okay.
It would take a partnership with, whether it's the restaurants or the farms. Yeah. Oh. I mean, we do quite a bit of work with marketing and promoting as much of the ag tourism that we have in Fitchburg, which we actually have a lot. There's the Midwest Gypsy Swing Fest. I don't know if people have ever been to that here, but it's really impressive. People come, musicians and visitors come from all over the world. It takes place at Bill Conzemia's farm at the barn there. It's a weekend long. It's a very specific type of music, but it's really kind of impressive. So it's just kind of that hidden gem that takes place on their farm, but attracts people from all over. Of course, we have the apple gardens. We have a lot of tourism assets that are ag related that we work to promote. And in fact, that group that we brought here last fall, we're working with them to kind of make that an annual opportunity. Yeah.
Hey, Angela.
If you're cooking, I will be happy to promote the ticket sales for you.
You don't want me cooking.
I would like to, on behalf of Bike Fitchburg, thank the Chamber for chipping in a good chunk of change toward the 200 sets of the bike lane uprising bike lights. I don't know if everybody's familiar with this, but Bike Fitchburg was fundraising to get 200 sets of lights to give away to people in the community who are riding around at night without lights. And I think we were, 30% of the way through that, and the Chamber picked up the rest of the tab.
Yeah, it's a good partnership. So anytime you buy a Bike the Berg t-shirt, that funds a free light to somebody who needs it for transportation in Fitchburg. And Bike Fitchburg is a great partner of ours. And I think I was even surprised how many people use biking transportation year-round to get to and from work, and they need good quality lights because it's not always light out at 6 or 7 o'clock at night in Wisconsin. So all t-shirts proceeds from Bike the Berg campaign this year will have gone directly to these guys to get free bike lights to people. So
I also wanted to suggest that since we don't have the Fitchburg Festival of Speed this year, and I don't know whether that's going to be a one-year absence or a multi-year absence, but we really ought to have some sort of a festival where we, kind of like the Agora Art Fair, but, another one like that where we close down the street to car traffic, we bring out music, food cart vendors, et cetera, and just have a festival on the street. I'm not, but I got the mayor and rep from the chamber in the room, so planting a seed, right?
We're trying. We to be a little strategic about not that having a biking event or bike-centered event would be a good idea, but we're trying to be strategic. And this year, we're kind of putting our efforts behind growing that holiday lights tour, and it's literally just because the population is telling us they appreciate it and they like it. And when you look at the gamut of our events, we want to make sure kind of year-round we have attractions that bring people. So this year we're focusing on that, but who knows?
But I think we are doing some sort of that with the Mackey Farm, concert at the park. You know what I mean? So those events are, I don't know. I go every year, and there are people. They're full. So. And there is a lot of food carts and beer.
Yeah, I'll say we're real proud of the concerts at McKee. Our intention when we took that over from the senior center was not only to just grow it in quantity, but to really make sure that it was accessible, inclusive to everybody, and that people feel welcome. And I feel like it's really one of the most authentically representative and diverse events really in Dane County, but even of our community. I love seeing the different, people that are there in terms of families, and we partner with our senior living facilities, and they bring vans of people from their residents to the event. So, I think we should be really proud of that event. With our sponsorship from the businesses, we are able to continue to make it free for everybody because we bring in bands that most people, typically you would have to pay $15-20 or more to see. So, yeah, very proud of that event. And if you haven't been, I hope you come this year.
All right, we're trying to wrap this up in 4 minutes, so let's try to be.
Well, I just wanted to comment on the agriculture idea. We had a Dane County breakfast on the farm here. When was that? 2001 or 2? And it's done by the Dane County Dairy Promotion Committee, so they move it around, and it's rarely in the same place twice. They also, I don't think they'd be interested in doing it at Bill Konzemius's place because they like to do it on an operating farm so that people can go on, tours around the farm and see the machinery and the animals and that kind of thing. But we still do have some dairy operations in Fitchburg. The last one that we did was at the O'Brien farm, and that's no longer really operating in the same way. So hopefully we can lobby them and see. I mean, we'd have to find a destination first, I suppose. We'd have to find a farm in Fitchburg that would be suitable for what they want.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Angela. Appreciate you coming out.
Thanks.
Giving us an update.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to our next item, strategic plan outreach, and I'm going to ask Chad to kick this off.
Thank you, Alder Gerhardt. We have Allison Brunette, who's from Allison Brunette Consulting, with us this evening. The city, as you all know, has embarked on a strategic planning process, the first ever strategic planning process for a city who is just over 40 years old. And through a competitive request for proposal process, Allison's consulting firm was selected from, I think, was it 10 or 12 proposals? So many of you, if not all of you, have met Allison through the interviews that she's already conducted and or the other workshops or focus groups. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Allison.
We can't hear you.
So what works best? How about now? You good?
Yes, now.
Okay. I'm not sure if it works best if Scott shares my slide deck or if I should be sharing my screen. What do you recommend?
If you can share it, that'd be great.
Okay, sounds good. All right, everybody able to see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. So thank you so much for the chance to meet with you again. Obviously, I saw you just a few weeks ago, but I wanted to talk with you all about an expanded outreach plan for a few reasons, and I will try to keep this as concise as possible to leave time for discussion. So if you're unfamiliar, I want to kind of take us through what the original outreach plan looked like and then what we are suggesting we do to enhance the outreach plan. So originally, the RFP was released by the city of Fitchburg in December 2023. So I presume it was drafted by staff last fall. And I'm not certain at what time it would have come before city council, but these were the expectations outlined in the RFP. It's kind of a blend of internal engagement, public-facing engagement with both residents and businesses, and then one-on-one interviews, right? But it doesn't necessarily specify what that outreach should look like within the community or if there are targeted demographics that we are prioritizing. Now, if you have not seen my proposal specifically, here is what we included in our original proposal in January of this year. It included much of which you've already been a part of, elected official and employee engagement through internal surveys, 25 one-on-one interviews with either myself or some of my team members across council, the mayor's office, department heads, and the city administrator, 4 on-site workshops for city council staff and department heads, 2 of which we've now completed, 2+ community focus groups, a community-wide online survey, and a community-wide digital engagement platform. All this to say, we're still planning on doing all of this, but we've had a little bit of a change of perspective, both within my firm and within the city for a few reasons. Since November of last year and December when that RFP was released, we've had a couple opportunities for engagement in the community around some high-profile issues. In February, you had your pretty contentious public meeting around the police department facility expansion, which generated some publicity that was in some cases negative, definitely an increased culture of distrust, and honestly, kind of a bad taste in the public's mouth, right? There was a lot of sentiments, regardless which side of you were on that issue, of whether or not enough engagement was done before the announcement, if that process could have been improved, and if the public sentiments expressed at that meeting might have been expressed earlier if a more robust engagement process could have been completed. Then on April 24th, 2024, community perceptions presented on the follow-up on the referendum survey, which was sent out through a postcard mailing to the entire city. And you had I believe it was a 14% response rate across the community. And Multiple members of council expressed concern and disappointment regarding the representation within that survey. While statistically it was an acceptable margin, there was some frustration or disappointment reflected by city council members that effort did not include enough renters, it did not include enough young professionals, and there was little to no data on how many Spanish language speaking participants participated in that survey. So where does that bring us right now? Well, honestly, I don't want to be part of another disappointing engagement effort. So I want to kind of take a pause and understand how we can do better this time. Now that we have some insights into what hasn't worked and what has generated some pretty hot button meetings over the last few months. So one of the core values of my business is what I like to call listening loudly. And this manifests in two ways. Number one, I don't sell people things that they don't need. Yeah, it's great for my bottom line, but it's terrible for my brand. And number two, I don't preach, project, or proselytize, which means that I don't come in and tell you how to run your community. I listen to what you and your community members are already saying and then give that to you, right? So how does that apply here? Well, honestly, through our surveys, through our meetings, through our one-on-ones, in particular with city council, we heard a lot of frustration thematically around what engagement has looked like in the past. And I've highlighted some key things that came out of either interviews or comments that came to me directly. And these are all from conversations directly with y'all. So, just some themes here. There's been a historical challenge for the city to connect with Hispanic residents. I also heard this framed by staff, some comments on the fact that immigrant communities or communities that perhaps are undocumented, even though the city is not involved in immigration enforcement, there's hesitancy to interact with government in any capacity, right? And that makes engagement and outreach difficult. Concerns about outreach efforts not being fully accessible, concerns about not having enough opportunity to engage one-on-one with a monolingual Spanish-speaking community, feeling that events in the past have maybe not been as well advertised as they could be, and wanting to offer more in-person engagement versus relying wholly on technology access, rather than just relying on a website or a digital survey, having in-person opportunities. And even though we might have an organization come in and say, hey, a 14% response rate is statistically valid, the theme I was hearing was, this may have been statistically valid, but it's simply not good enough. So when I hear that, I say, let's take a pause. So there's 7 key questions here that I'm going to take us through as quickly as I possibly can to leave space for discussion. But the 7 questions are listed here, and I will introduce them as I get to each slide. So number 1, how do we avoid another disappointing engagement effort? I mean, really what it comes to is pausing, reflecting, and adapting to meet your expectations. And I think I shared directly with several of you, I feel that my proposal, which was obviously approved several months ago, doesn't meet some of the expectations that I'm now understanding city leaders have. So I want to offer the opportunity to better meet those expectations now that I've gotten to know you and your community a bit better, and I understand those needs a little more intimately. I want to communicate concerns before they get any worse, set realistic expectations, think outside the box, and find more opportunities to bring in experts and to engage in person. How do we try new approaches to engage underrepresented audiences? So several things. I've already contacted some interpreter and translation services to run advertising in both English and Spanish. We are looking at how to maximize folks' time. So I know that Adam had shared with you a draft of the survey instrument. We decided to basically hack that in half, not because the questions weren't good ones, but because we understand that the attention span everyone has is shorter and shorter and shorter by the year. So we wanted to reduce that survey commitment time to under 10 minutes so that we could garner, hopefully, a more complete response rate. And SurveyMonkey, the tool which I use for survey development, they have our modified shortened survey coming in an estimated that 75% of folks who click into the survey will complete the entire survey. So if we can get more people to participate more representatively, that's a win. We just have to be mindful about asking the right questions. We also want to try hosting events that do not take place in City Hall, but take place in more locations that are accessible in neighborhoods, provide interpretation in real time for folks who either prefer to speak in Spanish or do not speak English. to support their attendance, and then run all of our survey tools and website in multiple languages. Now, how do we reach people? This is kind of the $1,000,000 question that everyone has to answer in communications when people are not all in the same spaces digitally or places physically. Some of the unique approaches I'm suggesting in this expanded outreach effort include introducing some advertising campaigns on social media tools, including Facebook, Instagram, and Nextdoor, running those advertisements in both English and Spanish, holding pop-up events that piggyback on well-attended functions. So instead of perhaps hosting a bunch of our own events that may or may not garner attendance, go where people already are going to be. So looking at opportunities to partner with, let's say, organizations like local food pantries that do mobile events in Fitchburg neighborhoods, or the farmers market. Use old reliable tools we know work, like the Fitchburg Star and city social media, but build on that. And honestly, spread the word. There's a lot of data that indicates that the best way to drive engagement is for folks to interact with your message multiple times on multiple platforms. And I'm going to give all of you an invitation to be a part of that process a little later in the slide deck. So how do we define successful engagement efforts? Honestly, there's not a lot of great data on this, but from what I could find, and I've linked all my sources here so you know I'm not just like making this up as we go, the National Research Center has indicated that the average engagement rate on a statistically valid survey, so that's where you have random sampling, is 20 to 30%, whether that is mailed or web-based. So that means that you are not allowing the public at large to just respond in organic fashion. You are coming up with a representative sample and targeting who responds. If you do have an organic community survey or a random sample one, you want to try to, of course, be representative of the entire community demographics. However, we know that that is a big lift because this source through the International City County Management Association on local government surveys points out that younger residents, males, renters, and people of color traditionally do have lower survey response rates on government-issued surveys. We also know, and this is a bit of a dated article, but it had really great data, some interesting points on who do and do not respond to government surveys. Individuals who've lived in a community for more than 10 years were 3 times more likely to attend public meetings and contact elected officials. You can also assume that somebody who's sort of that super citizen, so to speak, not saying that they're better than everyone else, but they're perhaps engaged at a higher level, they're more likely to take a survey too. Interestingly, the same data point found that Asian Americans had the lowest participation rates. Low-income residents participated at lower rates than 6-figure income earners, and young adults are the least likely of all age demographics to attend meetings or contact elected officials. I'm sure none of this is surprising to you, and it's not an excuse to say that we shouldn't engage these audiences. It just means we need to try harder. So how do we define specific successful engagement efforts for these 4 specific audiences? Young professionals, residents in your Healthy Neighborhood Initiative areas, renters, and monolingual Spanish speakers. So I am proposing that we target these 4 demographics in very specific and intentional ways. And I apologize, the text size is a little bit small on this. I will make sure that this slide deck is shared with you so you can refer back to it after this meeting. So what I've listed here under each audience is defining that audience, how we are going to reach them directly, as well as how we intend to reach them indirectly. Direct means that we are sending a message and paying to get it to them. Indirectly is working through partner organizations or individuals, and then how we want them to engage or how we anticipate we will be successful. So rather than read you this entire slide, I'm just going to talk about how we reach directly and how we'd like them to engage. So for young professionals between the age of 25 to 44, we want to reach them directly through targeted social media ads. And we are hoping that they will most likely engage with the digital survey and our social pinpoint website. HNI neighborhood members, we will reach them directly with targeted ads, which are run in both English and Spanish, understanding the demographics of these different neighborhoods and taking that into account. We are hoping that they are most likely to engage by attending the in-person events we will be hosting in their neighborhoods. More to come on that in a second. How are we going to target renters? This is a large population. As much as 52% of Fitchburg indicated in the 2020 census that they were renters. So it is a large number, but it is a challenging demographic to reach, largely in part because they tend to not interact with the city for as many services as someone who is a homeowner would, because their property managers arrange so many services. We hope to reach them directly through targeted ads on social media, and we are hoping, similar to young professionals, there's a lot of overlap in those demographics, that we will get them to engage on the digital survey and the social pinpoint site. And then lastly, it is difficult to know exact numbers of monolingual Spanish speakers, but the 2020 census did point out that 16.7% of Fitchburg census participants spoke a language other than English at home. And based on the parallel of Hispanic residents, we can presume that many of them are Spanish speaking. We will reach these audiences directly through targeted ads run in the Spanish language, as well as in-person ads in their neighborhood, as we are targeting some of those healthy neighborhoods to be locations for in-person events. And we're hoping they will engage through both in-person events in their neighborhood and participation in our Spanish language survey. So I am a big believer in assigning roles. I feel like after we set clear expectations, we should all know what our jobs are, right? So I will start with myself, because I am never one to point a finger without also including myself in that discussion. How I see my role moving forward in this expanded outreach effort is that I will be the lead facilitator for in-person events. I've already been working ad nauseum with Adam on developing the social pinpoint engagement website and updating and modifying the survey tools, which will be running in English and Spanish. I've already hired a professional interpreter and translation providers to professionally translate the survey instruments language for our ads that we'll be running and messaging, as well as leaving in a contingency budget to translate open-ended responses that come into the survey in Spanish. I've also hired interpreters so that we can have simultaneous interpretation for the in-person focus groups, which we'll be adding. Designing and hosting paid advertising, which will drive web traffic to the social pinpoint site, designing print collateral to bring to in-person events. Those will look like kind of call to action postcards with the QR and website code so that folks can access the survey. And then lastly, continuously tracking engagement so we understand where we're being successful and what's working to not only inform this process, but to inform the process in the future. I'll jump over to the orange box next on the left-hand side. The role I see for staff members in this is the coordination and co-facilitation of in-person events, reaching out to those indirect partners, realtors, community associational groups such as nonprofits, service clubs, chamber of commerce, faith-based organizations, to build those partnerships to reach residents that may or may not interact with the city directly. Use of the official city social media and communication channels to promote engagement, and identifying locations and opportunities to cross-promote our strategic planning effort with other engagement efforts. And then lastly, I of course want to bring our elected officials into this process too. Ways you can help: please provide names of constituents to city staff so that we can directly invite them to focus groups. Share with your audience the opportunities ahead of them to engage over the next couple of months multiple times. All of the data I've seen on community engagement points to the fact that very few people see one advertisement or one mailer or one social media post and say, you know what, I'm pretty busy, but let me take some time to engage in this strategic planning effort. It needs to be multiple times in multiple modalities for folks to get the message and have it in their brain of, yeah, this is something I should do because I've heard about it multiple times. And then please come and support and attend when possible and when it works for your schedule, those in-person events such as focus groups and pop-ups. So I also want to share, we really want to keep this simple. When we are driving people to a website, we only want to drive them to one place. Let's not complicate things. Now, I know Adam has shared the draft link of this. This is not something we're sharing publicly yet because we're still waiting to 100% confirm and lock in 2 of our neighborhood-based focus group sites, but I anticipate within the next day or 2 we'll have those locked in. I'm also waiting on the professional translation of the survey instrument. We had a city staff member translate it, and there were some questions about that translation, so we have hired it out to be completed professionally by a translation group in Dane County. So if you haven't had a chance to see the social pinpoint site yet, this is just a snapshot of what it looks like. It is also available in Spanish. It is not a perfect translation. It's a translation filter. You can toggle on and off. It translates into, I believe, 12 languages. So I can't personally attest for the accuracy, but it was one of the major reasons that I recommended this platform was the fact that it is so usable in both English and Spanish. So when we are asking you to invite constituents, we want to send them here. This is the only place we want to send them. From this website, they can access a link to the survey right under the subscribe area. They can also register to attend the focus groups. The focus groups, we are scheduling 8 of them. All of them will be in person in HNI neighborhoods and accessible transit-oriented neighborhood locations. 3 of the 4 are scheduled to take place in faith-based organizations, and 1, I believe, tentatively is hosted at a nonprofit organization. We're also doing some pop-up events. Some of those we're just kind of lining up until this is public. We just had some placeholders here. What I can't guarantee is that this will work. I certainly cannot guarantee that people are going to come to all of these events and sign up for these focus groups or take the survey or respond to our advertising. But I want to try new things and aim for success because I understand how important this is and what a value it is. So, what's the bottom line, right? That's question 6 and 7. How does this impact our timeline, first of all? So this expanded outreach effort does set our timeline back 7 weeks. The final plan will be brought forth now in September 2024 versus early August. The June strategic planning workshops, which were planned for June 4th, have been canceled for now, and we will push those back until late July. The reason for pushing those back is those workshops are heavily informed by the feedback we receive in focus groups and from the community survey. It would be not an effective use of time to have those workshops in early June if so much of our engagement effort and promoting the survey takes place in June, right? So we want to give 6 to 8 weeks of having those tools live before we come together in late July to engage in our strategic planning efforts. There are cost increases, which I will detail on the next 2 slides, related to the additional hours my team will spend on this, additional travel expenses, marketing expenses, printing, etc. We also want to set us up for success, like I said. So I've suggested that we shorten both the English and Spanish surveys to be under 10 minutes to complete. Right now, it's 7 minutes to complete if you do not want to take the extra minute to answer demographic information, 8 minutes if you answer the demographic information. We've also changed the structure of some questions. Adam, kudos to him, brought up a great point on even if a survey looks and feels shorter on a desktop, how many folks will likely participate on their cell phones, making sure that it still looks and feels achievable on a mobile device. So we've made some changes to save the highest value questions where we feel like we can get the best and richest insights, but also make it as accessible as possible. And then lastly, we want to keep other options for engagement in our back pocket. It's pretty costly to do a postcard mailing like was done for the referendum. The average mass mailing to a community with the household size of Fitchburg is anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 per mailing. So it is not cheap for an outreach effort that has virtually no tracking, right? I mean, you don't know which of those end up in the recycling bin. You might be able to, if you have unique QR or URLs, understand which neighborhoods or which demographics keep them and respond to them. But anything print, it's really hard to get those effective data metrics on. But we can certainly keep that in our back pocket. If we are still feeling like the response rates are not enough, perhaps we can target specific neighborhoods. There's also the option too, this is not a popular area for most local governments because it can kind of be seen as like inappropriate use of tax dollars. I have had some local government communities where my company sponsors some sort of giveaway if people participate in a survey. So maybe 1 week of the survey, folks who participate qualify to receive like a gift certificate to a local Fitchburg business, or, I mean, I know it's not local, but I've never met anybody that didn't want like an Amazon gift card, right? So sometimes those incentivization drives can really help drive participation if it's lagging as well. So what does this additionally cost? The additional cost to do this expanded outreach effort come in at just over $12,000. I did kind of budget heavily for the printing and marketing expenses, just not knowing how far that would go. The number on translation interpretation services is exact. I did shop around and got quotes from 3 different entities before landing on that. And that would include 11 additional events, 3 pop-ups and 8 focus groups. I'm also suggesting that city staff run a minimum of 2 additional pop-ups. However, they're at a time that, as much as I would love to be there, I am out of state for another client. how does this impact overall budget for the project? The original RFP not to exceed budget was just over $40,000. So including this does bring our new total budget to $53,000. This is a 28.6% increase in project costs to garner more public input. But I really personally felt that I should bring this before you because my sense from where we left things at the last workshop and from my one-on-ones with you is that outreach, especially targeted outreach of those 4 demographics, is a really important value to you. And like I said, I really try to lead my business based on listening. When I hear my clients set different expectations from what I had originally understood, I think the best practice is just to pause and I'll get on the same page. So that's all I have. I will stop sharing so we can chat now. I'd love to hear your thoughts and any reactions to this.
Thanks, Allison. I'll start with Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. I just know, like, talking to you on the phone, a lot of the feedback that I had mentioned and that you said other council members mentioned had been followed up with really actionable feedback, and I appreciate that. One thing I didn't mention when I was on the phone, and I just want to give a kudos to city staff for doing this, was the outreach that was done when the Southdale neighborhood was getting ready to become a part of Fitchburg. I just think it was very thorough and comprehensive. It was community engaged, and council showed up in numbers as well as staff. And I know that just talking to residents in that area, that it was really appreciated as a welcome to Fitchburg. So, I mean, that's, I think, a potential model for engagement, just kind of looking at the notes from how those events were planned. I think another source of, and this goes specifically to like what other events are happening, is the neighborhood resource teams with the city of Madison, because I think there is, you know, an effective kind of network of service providers, city of Madison staff, and at least 2 of those neighborhood resource teams are in areas that directly are border the city of Fitchburg. So the Allied one in the Leopold Arbor Hills NRT, they're both right across the street from Fitchburg. So I would say that if you're looking for events and you're looking for people to tap into, the folks that lead those NRTs would be good sources.
Donald.
So with the targeted outreach for the having us like the survey digital, is it just going to be housed on a website like you showed and other places where people can go find it, or they're directed to that? Or do we have some sort of repository of people's email addresses and or phone numbers through the city where we can send that directly to people instead of having them go somewhere like to find it? Because I know that's one thing that does work well, and it can be programmed into the survey platform where they can go directly to them, and it'll create a mechanism of tracking who took the survey, who didn't, and automatically generate reminders and things like that if we have access to that, just as another way to increase engagement.
Do we have a list with emails?
I can speak to capabilities on my end. I am able to send directly through SurveyMonkey. However, I'd have to check with staff on what privacy disclaimers were surrounding collection of those email addresses. I don't know if it would violate some of those privacy disclaimers to share those email addresses with me to distribute, even though I would not use them for any other purpose. God knows I do not have the energy to write a newsletter and like spam people with emails, but I just want to check and make sure we're kosher on sharing email addresses in that capacity.
So I know we have our notify me function on our website. Obviously that is built with pretty much everyone's emails and a lot of cell phone numbers in as well too. But I think it goes to Allison's point. Typically when you fill those out, I don't think we can export those out and then start sending them separate types of emails with that. I think that's probably some type of don't want to say violation, but that's probably some type of email policy violation with the provider who hosts our website. But we can use how we push out like notifications. We can push it from there. I just don't think, I'm not sure if we can track it uniquely like that.
So I'm just curious, like, so for example, when we like run for office, you have access to the van thing that we pay for, and it shows you like people's addresses and things like that. We don't have something similar just for the city that can be shared since it's already public information.
We have property addresses. I'm not aware of like email addresses though. That I don't think we have, but we have obviously all the property addresses for every residential property in the city.
So Alison, this is Julia. So I want to say thank you. I think, I am all in favor if we need to expend a little bit more money, but slow down and do the outreach, in a more robust way and try to outreach the community, engage the community, because I always say that we are a diverse community, but our diverse community, I don't think that is engaged. And I think, slowing down the process a little bit more and be more intentional with the focus group and do it where the people live, I will see this is great. So I thank you for being considerate and accepting, because all of this, the feedback that we provide you about the outreach. Thank you for listening to us, okay, with our concerns. I echo what Joe mentioned about in the Southdale area. It's very important that we do an outreach there because this is our new part of the city. So we need to make those neighbors feel that we care about their opinion, the feedback, their input. So we need to be very intentional and take the time and do it right. So I am all in favor of, of adding more outreach, to the plan. So I want to mention that I appreciate that. And yes, and my other question is how people will know. I know that there is a digital ad, and we are going to be more intentional with how people can find out about this survey. You know what I mean? So that one is another question that I have. And also, most of us, well, some of us, we have our own blog or our newsletter. So, my newsletter is going tomorrow, so I am including this information. I don't know the survey is going to be, ready or not, but the link is going. So, but the question is that we need to be more, we need to work more.
Well, I'll make sure you have the right link. I'll send you that, Julia.
Please, before I can send it by Friday. I can move it one day more, but I think all of us here, we need to, if we have blogs, newsletter, let's share this link with our constituents.
Comment from Joe.
Yeah, I'll just say two more things. One, I remembered you had mentioned kind of having landlords as a conduit, and I think when we were passing out surveys to hire the police chief, the response rate was like super low, and one of the PFC members actually reached out to me, and we went literally to, I don't know, 25. No, we went to like 25 apartment complexes and basically like gave them physical copies of the survey to put in their rental office, and then have the landlords actually email out about the survey. And I don't know, within a week, I may be exaggerating here, but the response rate went way up after that happened. I don't know if it's a product of what we did or if it just naturally went up. But I think that is an effective method because they have access to hundreds of people, thousands of people. The other thing, just as like maybe a tip to alders, city staff, and anybody, is when you do schedule those public engagement meetings, have like a flyer with a QR code, because if we're walking around at, concerts in McKee and we're just talking to people, then we just pull our phones out and say to somebody like, hey, here's a survey. Hey, here's this event. Hey, and somebody can just scan our phone. And it's just like an easy, natural way of like us advertising rather than us having to like go into our email, write our blog, make that extra step. It can just be something organically that pops up that's kind of easy for us to do. So
I have a couple of questions.
I love that. I'm going to up the ante. I can make custom QR codes for each of you, so I'm going to give you a challenge. Whoever's QR code gets scanned the most on City Council, I owe you a Kringle.
Wow.
I love it.
done.
I've got a couple questions. One, I mean, overall, I think this plan is really great. I appreciate the detailed. I think this is a model for how we can do outreach for future city things.
Yeah.
So I really love the thought that was put into it, and I appreciate it. I think it's something that would work to include more of the community. I have two kind of questions that are ancillary to this. Number one, do we know when we're potentially going to, I know we haven't made a final decision on the referendum, but if we do move forward on that, when does the education start for the referendum? Because having the two competing processes simultaneous, I think, is a big issue.
Yeah, so I think we're going to be okay. So the bulk of that educational campaign for the referendum would possibly start in August, but then really ramp up in September and October. And by the time we get to that point, hopefully this plan is either wrapping up or pretty much being very close to wrapping up. So they're actually working out pretty well, to be honest with you, because if we were talking in August referendum, or possibly looking at November instead, if it was August, we'd be kind of colliding right now, and that could be a problem. But we're on separate tracks now. I feel pretty good. We're going to be okay with that.
Yeah, and hopefully maybe we could even use some of these techniques to work on the referendum, share that with Mueller. Second question, functionally, how do we move forward with this, Chad? Would we look at a direct referral at the next council meeting, or, because we obviously would need to authorize funding before we could move forward with this?
I can answer that, Chad. So I've checked with Misty already. So that's actually a change order that staff can approve just because of the dollar amount. So that's something that we would, just because of time, we're going to, after getting the feedback tonight, we were ready to kind of make that change order happen pretty quick from a staff level standpoint. So that was going to be our plan.
Are there any other outcomes of this conversation you would like besides what's already happened? Like, do we want to hear directly from every alder, or?
I'll defer to Allison a little bit. Allison, are you looking to hear from everybody, or just a general consensus of this sounds like a good plan, and they're going to get you names and pump this up as much as they can? Is that what you're looking for?
I want to know what Jay thinks. I haven't heard from Jay yet. I know he's sitting on something brilliant.
I wouldn't go that far. I like the idea of more outreach, so I think, if that's what it costs, that's what it costs, and we should do it. I don't know that I have much more to add to it than that.
Bill, do you have any comments?
I just want to thank Allison for recognizing our concerns and for coming up with a plan to address that. This is excellent.
All right, if there's no more comments from anybody or staff, Allison, is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up? Oh, I'm sorry.
Only
David.
last thing is I should have the professional translation back any day now on the Spanish survey. The translation we had now was done internally by staff, and there were some questions or concerns with some of the verbiage in it. So if you're okay holding off until Friday, please wait to send out the survey and the link. So what that will look like, it will just be the link to Social Pinpoint, but I will have the updated professionally translated survey up hopefully within 48 hours. I will email all of you as soon as it's up. I know I'm asking some of you to hold off on your newsletter, but let's just make sure we do one announcement and we have everything right and done professionally.
Okay. Great. I'll just give a moment in case Dave wants to jump in. You don't have to, but I'm just going to give a second in case you want to.
Yeah, I just have one comment. Our Spanish-speaking residents, I don't have a sense, what percentage of them are voter. The people that are registered voters will determine whether this is successful or not. And I'm not sure that many that are only speak Spanish are registered. I don't know if you're gaining that much. The people that are registered voters are who you need to put focus on. I'd appreciate getting their feedback. But I'm just looking at numbers. I'm not a racist, Joel. I'm just looking at numbers.
Okay, Joe and then Julio.
Yeah, I have to say something. That's a very inappropriate comment. Regardless of if somebody votes, they are a resident of this city of Fitchburg. They pay taxes and they deserve a voice. So I think your comment is totally out of line, Alder Herbst.
I would tell you, I told you, they won't be the ones that determine it, Joel. They won't be the one. I didn't say I wasn't interested in hearing their voice.
That doesn't matter.
If they're not a registered voter, they won't have.
That doesn't matter, Alder Herbst. That doesn't matter.
And just to clarify, this is not about the referendum, this is about the strategic plan. So there actually is no vote related to the strategic plan. Every single person in the city. Yeah.
I want to echo what Joe mentioned because, even though I know my Latino population here in Fitchburg very well, okay? So even though some of them, this strategic planning doesn't care. I don't care if the people vote or don't vote. We need to involve every single resident, from renters to homeowners. You know what I mean? So we are an inclusive community, and everyone has to be included in this conversation. Okay? So on the comment that you made, they was very, very inappropriate. You know what I mean? So that one I want to say it because, it doesn't matter if the people vote or don't vote for this strategic planning. We need to hear any voices, and we need to include it. We need to be intentional. If they participate or no, is another thing. But we as a city, we need to do the outreach to them. We need to include them. We need to make them feel part of that process.
All right. I think we can move on to the next item. Thanks. Next up, next agenda item, Neighborhood Plan Process Overview, Greenfield Neighborhood Plan and South Stoner Prairie Neighborhood Plan Update from our city planner, Deanna. You have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. And if Scott can give me, I'm plugged in. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to come before you and just provide a little bit of background of the neighborhood planning process and a current status of where we are right now. And then I'll give you a little bit of where we're heading here in our next steps. So just to start off, I have just a handful of slides that I wanted to provide step back a little bit, take a context of where we are in terms of our neighborhood planning and how we got here. Back in 2007, the city of Fitchburg set about a very strategic planning process to develop an urban growth boundary that sought to protect farmland, ensure that our city services were long-term sustainable, limit the maximum growth of the urban service area to 75 acres, and then encourage compact development. So this map is just showing those future development areas in the pink color. So this was back from 2007. The gray portion was all of the urban Fitchburg, and then looking at those areas of future growth, you can kind of see a smaller area on the west side, and then coming down along 14, just to orientate yourself. So what we have today, and is the basis of our two current neighborhood plans, are the future urban development areas. We have, so far in the city, completed 3 neighborhood plans. The Northeast Neighborhood Plan, which is on the east side of Fitchburg, east of 14. That one, and I should have had my dates there. That was done in 2010. Of course, we've done the McGaw Neighborhood Plan, and then Also, we've done the North Stoner Neighborhood Plan, which was back from 2013. Some primary goals here of this neighborhood planning process is healthy urban and rural communities, attractive transit-oriented neighborhoods, and protecting natural resources and farmland. So those are some of the key points in entering into this process of neighborhood planning. Neighborhood planning sets up our next stage to talk about extending our urban service area boundary and extending those sewer, water lines, and new subdivisions and new development. I have up here a link to all of the approved neighborhood plans and studies. So if you are looking for all of our existing adopted neighborhood plans, you can always send me an email, but they are up on the city's website, all of the ones that we have done. So what you'll see here is that we're working on our two next neighborhoods, the South Stoner Neighborhood Plan here on the west side, and then Greenfield Neighborhood Plan, neighborhood study. Things that we look at here as we're doing a neighborhood plan, we're working closely with the Capital Area Regional Planning Association for the coordination and approval of extension of those urban services. We're looking as a part of the comp plan, so a future neighborhood plan will become part of the comp plan. And our analysis is going to include natural resources, parks, open space, transportation connectivity, stormwater utilities, land use, urban-rural interface, and the goals of the comp plan. And I feel like I'm throwing a whole bunch of stuff out here. So is there any questions or comments about kind of how we got here to talk about and do a neighborhood plan?
I just had a quick question
You
around
bet.
something that you mentioned on the first slide. What does compact development mean?
Good question. Yeah. So normally what that is talking about is having a tighter network of roads and streets. It can be a mix of higher density uses with some lower density uses, but the idea is to have the urban development that's not sprawling out into the urban. So a mix of uses, more walkable with a mix of transportation, types of transportation, walkable, transit, bikeable.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to get into it here, but also I've heard a lot of people talk about how that is actually a cost savings measure for the city, because if you have denser neighborhoods, you have denser communities, you're not spreading out city services as far, and it allows us to kind of cut down on our costs per resident or per area. Is that correct?
It is. This is a really important concept in urban planning that many communities are working with. For every mile of sewer line or every mile of water line, the more housing units, the more development that you have along that mile of sewer, lowers the cost overall for the city. So having denser development, having more housing units, having mixed development in those more compact communities is more affordable long-term for maintenance and repair and replacement. Yeah, it's a great concept. Yeah. Okay. So bleeding into this, the comp plan guides our neighborhood plans. And so as we go into thinking about the comp plan, we are aligning our goals in the neighborhood plans to our comp plan. So sustainable, equitable, vibrant, cooperative. These are important concepts that are elements of our comp plan, but also guiding our neighborhood planning. that means in action, thinking about those city services long-term sustainable, kind of like as we just talked about, diverse types of housing, renter, homeowner, but different sizes of home ownership, right? Different styles and mix of housing, mixed uses. We often are using the term complete communities, communities where people can live, work, and play, all in that same area, all in that same neighborhood. Compact development that allows people to walk or bike or have transit to their destination. And then tying this back together to farmland preservation and open space preservation. So what we've done so far, we've had one general open house that was for both neighborhood plans. We've done South Stoner Prairie open house, 3 South Stoner Prairie steering committees. We've had a Greenfield neighborhood visioning meeting, 1 Greenfield neighborhood concept feedback meeting, 3 Greenfield steering committees. And right now, as I'll start working through what we're hearing from the community, we're proposing to actually slow down a little bit on Greenfield and add a couple other steering committees, maybe another work session. And I'll kind of explain why we're looking at doing that as we're talking through my next slides. So we've done a lot of work to date. We've heard a lot of great feedback from our community. And now we're moving into those next stages of refining those ideas. And that's what I put in your packet, is the bubble diagrams. This is kind of the first stage in thinking about land uses and how different parts of a neighborhood come together. So I'll start off with South Stoner. And what we have here with the bubble diagrams, it's not meant to be that this is going to be exactly here or there. These are more just kind of general bubbles to show relationships between future land uses. So what you're looking at here is option A and option B. The brighter yellow is low density residential. There's also high density residential in here, mixed density, medium density residential, and then a neighborhood mixed use. So we believe that having these different types of land uses and how they work together is an important piece of how we get to complete communities. Option A, of course, has a school in the middle. There's overall more housing in option A, and you can see that option A does not have the business park that is shown in option B. And so that's why the school is possible in option A, because there's just more housing units and more kids, more families. So these were the 2 options that the planning team put together for South Stoner Prairie. So happy to take any comments or questions, otherwise I'll just push right along on those 2 options.
Looks like I can keep pushing on.
Okay,
Thanks,
great.
Yeah, go
Just a quick question. Have
Yep.
we done any, and I think I asked you this before, have we done any analysis here as to where gravity sewer can happen?
Not yet.
Yeah.
We will. That's our next step.
Because that's going to be a huge issue. Mm-hmm. And if it turns out that half this area can't gravity sewer, then we're going to have a major problem.
I agree. Our neighborhood plans, of course, our original FUDAs were designated, as you might recall, Jay, in
yes.
general areas for gravity-fed sewer. And that's an important piece in terms of the sustainability of our long-term infrastructure and the cost effectiveness of infrastructure. So at the big scale, yes, the FUTA for South Stoner Prairie was identified as potentially able to be gravity-fed sewer. We'll need to work through, once we refine a little bit more, exactly which areas can be gravity-fed. We don't know that quite yet.
But in that case, there is the option of lift stations too.
That has been done. That is certainly
yeah.
an option. I think these are questions. These are big questions, right? In terms of how do you balance the idea of compact communities, complete communities, mixed use communities, with ensuring that we're being sustainable long term with our infrastructure. In some cases, it is possible that it might make sense to have a lift station, depending on how we balance those different needs and wants. So what we're hearing, and this is really important and kind of the key point of why I'm here tonight, because I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're hearing from both our work in South Stoner Prairie and then also our work in the Greenfield neighborhood. So the steering committee generally preferred option A with some business park on the east side of Commerce Park. We have done a survey with South Stoner Prairie, and there really wasn't a clear winner, so to speak, in either A or B. What we're hearing from the community regarding South Stoner Prairie, and this is a theme that's been very strong, preserve connection to nature, trails, greenway. This is a very important piece of what people are interested in. Support for mixed-use housing with some higher density housing closer to Lacey. The thinking there is that it would support transit. We've heard a concern for affordability. In general, we hear that people prefer low-density residential, but of course we can do higher density, small lot townhomes, duplexes, single family, and I'm thinking there about like Terra Vesa. There's a theme of maintaining connection to the agricultural landscape, our history and culture of agriculture, and also a real strong interest in the views and just our landscape. So these are some of the themes that I think is important that we're hearing from the community. We've also done some interviews, especially with some of the larger landowners in South Stoner Prairie. As you might be aware, much of the current South Stoner neighborhood plan area is currently in a quarry for excavation or will be quarried over the next 5 or 10 years. We're going to be dealing with some challenges related to those quarry walls. When the materials are removed, oftentimes we are left with high walls that would likely be backfilled. One of the landowners are not as interested in business park, which adds to some complexity in our planning process. And also another landowner is interested in business park west of Commerce. We also have one of our landowners that is adamant against any quarry activity and very concerned about protecting the views and desiring low-density residential. So these are some of the things that I want to bring forward to council to say that this is what the team is hearing. And these are the kinds of things that we're working to balance with what we have in our comp plan, right? So we're working through this process to balance what we're hearing in the community what we're hearing from landowners in order to bring forward the best neighborhood plan that we can. I'll move ahead
we take
to
a
Greenfield unless
question?
there's... Oh, sure.
Before you do, and while you're on that topic,
Yeah.
we talk about compact development, and in general, that has been applied to residential areas. I'm looking at 115 acres of business park in this, and that just irritates me because the businesses that, I look at our business parks in Fitchburg where we have a building and a lot of grass and a gigantic parking lot. Sometimes the parking lot is 4 or 5 times the size of the building. And so we need to start getting the businesses that want to locate here to think in terms of compact development for businesses. We get businesses coming here who want 10 or 12 or 15 acres to build one building. Across the street from where I live, in what is supposed to be one of the densest areas of the city, we've got a business there that's occupying a large amount of land. And they have a relatively small building and a fairly good-sized parking lot. And that's just not the direction, that's an inappropriate direction for us to be going. So I think we need, I don't have a problem with having business park if we're going to talk about business park in a sustainable, meaningful way. And that's just not, I don't, when I see 115 acres there, that doesn't look to me like meaningful compact development. That looks like big sprawling business parks like we see on the west side of Madison, and we see in Fitchburg, and we see in Verona, and we see in other places.
I think Julia had a comment first, and then Joe.
My question, Liana, are you planning to extend this one too?
Extend South Stoner Prairie?
Yes.
No, we don't. We are not looking at more meetings for this one.
So you're going to be finalizing by when?
This one, depending on this one, we're not. It's going to be easier for the team if we keep both of the neighborhood plans on a close schedule. We could bring this one forward a little bit faster if that is what you all prefer. But what we're hoping to do is add 2 meetings for Greenfield, and it might be easier for us if we keep the South Stoner Prairie on a similar schedule without adding any meetings.
It happens. So my question is, because I remember when we mentioned that our next step is the revision of the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
We mentioned in the past that we are going to wait for the 2 neighborhood plan to be done and they start.
Yeah.
If we are extending this neighborhood plan, we are also extending or delaying and to be honest, I don't want that. You know what I mean? Because it's going to take, I don't know how many months from the RSP and everything, and then we are going to be doing start the comp plan, maybe in summer next year start. And that one is my concern,
Okay.
is delaying this neighborhood plan. Is the comp plan, has to be the RFP, has to be out at the end of the year. This was the original plan.
That is the plan.
Yeah, that one is my concern, that this delaying this plan, delaying the other process too. So that's it.
Okay. Joe and then Dave after.
So just thinking about my earlier question and Jay's comment, this may be a thought for if we get a communications director, is how do we as a city communicate in a simple and almost appealing type of way about the cost-saving, cost-effectiveness of dense development. Because I think from an economic perspective, right, a lot of taxpayers are thinking about, increased city costs and services and taxes. But also, over the years, we've had kind of a knee-jerk reaction to dense development. I think, there's almost kind of a marrying of the possibility of saying like, hey, this is good from an economic standpoint. Like maybe there's some sort of marketing videos that already exist out there that we could have on our website that show that it makes sense. It houses more people. It allows for more businesses. It cuts down on city services if we invest and go in this direction, so that we're not just either catering to the whims of a few landowners or a few kind of more vocal residents who just happen to show up at everything. And I respect everybody's viewpoint, but this fiscally makes sense, and it also environmentally makes sense. It also makes sense in so many ways, and it's something that we should probably be preaching loudly to people, other than just kind of in our decision-making meetings and our committee meetings.
I think you bring up a really good point. There are increasingly good resources out there. I certainly can work with the communications team too to see if maybe we could do something a little bit more tailored. It is a huge factor, and it's just very difficult. I think what we're I'll go into Greenfield a little bit more, but we're hearing from the community, that's all great, but can you put it over there? Yeah. And so what we're trying to balance is that, and it's more so in Greenfield, yes, we understand as planners that density and compact development makes so much sense in all different types of ways. But for people in their backyard, this is a huge, passionate, difficult process. Yeah.
Dave and then Bill.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to Jay was asking about the lift station, and I've been involved with this, and I have quite a bit of history. And as Jay knows, I don't know if all of you do, but many years ago, basically the 138 double circuit that goes on the south side of the city, that was kind of the limit. The north side of that, you could have gravity feed to MMSD. And the south side would require a lift station, which Fitchburg did not want. And so that kind of limited our development. And I'm still not too opposed to that. But what the developers are pushing, when they meet with me, they say, "Well, you already have a lift station in Terra Vesta." And I said, "No, Terra Vesta was plotted without a lift station. It was plotted gravity, and then the developer came back and said, "Oh, it's going to be $3 million for us to dig down through this berm or whatever to get it into gravity feed." And I look back at it now, and I think that was a short-sighted decision. We should have, looking at how successful the Terra Vesta is, I think they could have absorbed that and not have a lift station, and you take away the operating costs and building for that. But that's a decision council have to make. I'm not crazy about lift stations, especially it'd be serving a larger neighborhood, have increased maintenance. They're smelly. Do you want that to be your limit on development? Again, council needs to decide this. Developers don't care. They'll put them everywhere they can. So I just want you aware of that. That constraint and what implications it could have. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just continue to beat the same horse that Jay and Joe did with the compact development. I'm seeing a lot of low-density residential on here. And I don't know how you reconcile that with compact development. Also, I mean, so there's stuff on here labeled high density residential, medium density residential. Why would that not also be mixed use? Why do we have to have something that is strictly residential?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. I think here the team was just trying to kind of work with different land uses, and certainly I think planning in general is looking at how there are different uses and mixed uses even in a predominantly residential area. So I think it's a good point.
One more follow-up. I think you showed in your slides that people favor open green spaces and low-density residential. Those two are mutually exclusive. If you want open green spaces, I mean, you got 100 acres, you want to put up 100 homes, you can do it on 1 acre or you can do it on 50. Which one is going to preserve green space?
Yeah, I 100% hear you. Yeah. But these are, when we hear from people, we hear low density, right? And when we hear from people, we hear connection to nature and trail, protecting farmland. It's, they're not necessarily making those 2 points together. Yeah.
Jay?
Well, you hear low density, and then you hear those very people complain that a brand new house costs $500,000.
I know, Jay.
That's what a brand new house costs if you're building low density.
I know.
So I also wonder about, I mean, my brain only works in certain ways. So I grew up, I went to high school on an urban high school campus that was not anything even resembling 28 acres. And that was a high school that served 2,500 students for a while. So, and we had a football field, and we had a couple of baseball diamonds, we had other things there, and it was not 28 acres. So why does a school have to be 28 acres? That's kind of a question for another day, because the school board isn't here to answer that. But as I'm looking at this map, it looks like we haven't even given the slightest thought to using smart code here, which we have in our zoning code, and we don't have to do all this Euclidean stuff. We could just go with a smart code configuration, which would handle a lot of the issues that we've talked about tonight.
Yeah. Each one of the neighborhood plans will have a smart code configuration included too. This is kind of the initial planning step to get us towards that direction, but we will have a smart
Well,
code.
I mean, in smart code, presumably you're going to have T5 and T4 areas that are going to be located in the center of something with other stuff, nearby. And I when we get into the other plan, the Greenfield plan, I have some more of these same thoughts on that, but if I was going to configure a plan like this, I don't know, like in your option A for South Stoner Prairie, I'm not sure that I would stick low-density residential right along the major arterial like Lacey Road. It seems to me that's the road that's going to be more likely to have a bus route on it, and that's where you're going to want to have the most people concentrated. Granted, we may have other bus routes through here, but part of the problem that we have in Fitchburg with making transit really work is that when the development started in the 60s and 70s, there wasn't a lot of thought given to transit and how transit would work with these neighborhoods and what it takes to make a transit route successful. So these are things we need to think about now. And I just when I see these major arterial roads that have all this low-density residential packed around them. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I can follow up on that. I totally agree with you. We should be putting as much density along Lacey as possible. Of course, technically, this part is already in the future land use map. There's actually a comprehensive development plan approved here for lower density, medium density residential. So that's why that's the status quo. Essentially, this is the status quo. That's why in this one we proposed a higher density here up on the corner of Lacey and Fitchburg. We've gotten pushback from the landowner for that because there is an approved comprehensive development plan there. Yep.
So I guess I just have a comment too. So like in the process that you lay out, you talk a lot about the meetings, the public meetings. And while of course public input is valuable, you are the city planner and your staff is the experts, and we have professionals that understand city planning. And so how much of the process, it just seems to me based on from the outside that there's a lot being driven by the public input. How much are you and your staff and any sort of consultants we're using that are experts in city planning driving this decision making?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and I think planning has to be based on good planning professional decisions, and but also we need to do planning with our community, right? We don't want to be in a situation where we're completely ignoring our community also. So what we've been trying to do as staff is to try to find some meeting ground here. That said, that's why I'm here tonight, to talk to you all, so that you can hear some of the things that we've been hearing. If you feel strongly that the priorities, at the end of the day, council adopts the plan. And if you all feel strongly that, we should set high priorities in this particular direction, we certainly can.
Yeah, I would say that the other thing about public input is the people that are coming to these meetings are not necessarily a statistically significant sample of people in the city. And so the people that show up is not necessarily the will of the entire city. And there are a lot of people that would support compact development for many reasons, because they believe in it, because they care about climate change, because they care about their taxes. There's all sorts of reasons why people would support it, and they're not necessarily showing up. So I guess that's why the council makes the decision, right, is because we represent ideally the whole group of people. But I guess I trust city planners, good urban design, our comprehensive plan a lot.
Okay.
Joe.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. The statistics significance of who's right. If there's a small number of landowners, right, that's a small proportion of the population of the city. I would also say, and it's hard to gauge, right? It's hard to survey people who might live here in the future or might work here in the future, but I think that's as important of a factor as who lives here, because Fitchburg has skyrocketed in population since Jay has been on council, or prior to this, and frankly, there's just a need. People need to be housed, people need jobs, and we're in a place to offer that opportunity to people in a way that's environmentally sound and good for transportation, good for humans, good for thriving, and that should be a part of the factor, even though we can't formally ask people who are born 30 years from now or people who might move here from somewhere else, what they think and what they need, but they'll need this.
Julia and then Bill.
Yeah, so Diana, this is, I have been part of those meetings, attended several of them. And yes, we are going to hear from them the same music. okay? And this is what I want from the planning team, is like, we heard all of this, but this is what we recommend, because you guys are the expert in planning, okay? And yes, we need to listen to our community, we are listening to them, but sometimes we disagree, because they are not the expert. And you guys are the experts, so I prefer that you come and say, you know what? Because I know what is coming now. You're going to start talking about Greenfield, okay? Yeah, and this is the same small group of people that are against any development of housing in Fitchburg. Even they came when we did the infill parcel on East Sharon. Perfect example. Boom. Yeah. So my other question is, also we need to adjust and also incorporate some of the Dane County regional plan strategies in this neighborhood plan. And I think that one is key. They are very good goals, strategy, initiative, and some of our city is doing some of the stuff. We already start working on some. But I think we need to have that how they call it, strategic planning, housing strategic plan, also be, okay, this is what the Dane County strategic plan is looking. How, are we incorporating some of the initiative in these two plans? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's saying we need 495 housing units in Fitchburg annually, is what the plan says for those.
But this is what I say. I agree that the more, density on transit corridor, and I believe in smaller homes, lots.
Hey, Bill.
More of the same here. I'll just point out that if we ditch the low and medium density development here and we cluster everything along the transportation corridors, you don't need any interior roads really to any great extent. That also means you could have your business park and your school and house at least as many people as are present in either of these diagrams. Council has heard me say this before, but our roads are exceedingly expensive. This year, we're planning on spending $3.5 million to maintain our current 143 miles of roadway or whatever we've got. The more roads we build, the more we need to maintain every year, and that price tag is going to go up. At $3.5 million, that's what we're talking about for exceeding a referendum for exceeding the operating budget. It doesn't seem sustainable to me. In addition, either option A or B, with all that low density residential in there, it is difficult to have transit here. If you cluster everything along Fitch, Rona, and Lacey, a bus drives along those two roads. If you've got all this interspersed low density in here, well, maybe those people don't want to take the bus because they like polluting the environment. Who knows? But if you want to move a lot of people and actually have a successful transit system, it needs to go past a lot of people's houses.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's jump to Greenfield.
Okay. We did 3 concepts for Greenfield, and the one thing that I do want to point out here, we are proposing a little bit something different here. We're proposing the agrihood as an example of how to balance that wish for agriculture and the wish to maintain our agricultural landscapes with still adding some housing. So that's the idea of the agrihood. The other thing that I wanted to just point your attention to, because this does have a major impact on thinking about the future development of Greenfield, is the potential for an interchange. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that, but that was one thing that we've been kind of working through, whether or not there would be an interchange at all in option A. Option B, an interchange on Irish Lane, and otherwise we have looked at an option for an interchange to the north.
Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think when we did the original comprehensive plan in 2009, we envisioned an interchange at Irish Lane eventually, but I don't know if because we weren't really thinking that far ahead. We were thinking in a 50-year timeline at 75 acres a year, and that didn't. I don't think that got us all the way down here. But I think we're going to need an interchange, and hopefully the DOT will not fight us on it the way they did with the Lacey Road one. But while we're here, there are things I don't understand, like why in the middle of a low density residential section would we stick a park? A park seems like a completely, if you're talking about people who already have, quarter-acre lots maybe with big yards and all that, why do we need a park there?
Well, I mean, there is a park in here in Greenfield, and then this is the public land in here that the city of Fitchburg owns some land down
so
here.
So that's fine, but it would seem to me that we would not surround the park with low-density residential. That doesn't seem to be the best possible land use. It would seem you'd want to put as many people around the park who might be able to walk to the park instead of having to get in a doggone car and drive there. That would make more sense.
Well, the low density in the middle is just reflecting the existing Greenfield neighborhood housing.
Sure. Yeah. But, that housing stock is aging, and it's not aging terribly well. So ultimately, I mean, this is not going to happen next year.
No.
So ultimately, much of that is going to change. Is that the open space that you're showing to the north? That's mostly wetland, isn't it?
Yes. So this is mostly wetlands in here, and this is the approximate location of the Moraine Edge Park.
Right. Because that connects to basically where the power lines are.
Yes.
So it also seems strange that we would put a business park next to that, as is shown in a couple of these versions. And I also have questions about why the neighborhood mixed use would be placed next to open space. It seems to me that should be, because I presume neighborhood mixed use means we're going to have some residential, we're going to have some neighborhood retail, we're going to have things people can walk to. But if you're basically taking, half of the circumference of this and having it be open space, then a lot of people who could potentially walk to it aren't going to be in a place where they can. Those were two things that I wondered about. I also wonder, I don't know what an agri-hood is, but when we did the comprehensive plan, we talked a lot about the rail line. And the rail line goes right through the agri-hood. And it seems to me, what we were trying to do was build enough density, enough residential density on the rail line to make potential passenger rail possible. That could go down to Oregon and Brooklyn and to Rockford possibly, and maybe to Chicago, because that can all be done on this rail line that we own. So what I wonder is, why would we take a considerably low density use, which I presume is what an agri-hood is, and stick it on that major piece of infrastructure?
I think it's an excellent point, and the reason that agri-hood was ending up in that area is because the landowner indicated to us that his intention was that this would never develop and that he intended to keep it in a trust. And So we were respecting the landowner's intentions to never have development on those parcels.
Yeah, Julia.
I have a question in option C. You know, the interchange north of Irish Lane. So that one could be more costly, isn't it? Compared to the other one?
It would, in the sense that there would have to be a new crossing for 14. One of the challenges that we had is, of course, Irish Lane. There are probably 30 or so single-family houses right on Irish Lane, and it does make for a challenge to widen and change to a major arterial with so many single families along there. So that was one of the reasons we were exploring moving the interchange a little bit to the north.
To the north, but there is no a road there. We need to build.
Yes,
Oh.
we need to build road.
Okay. So what are the opinion of the Greenfield neighbors about an interchange?
Yeah, so first of all, there isn't a clear communication from the neighborhood about where an interchange should go. The steering committee is rather mixed on that interchange. There's just very large concerns from the residents and the homeowners, the property owners along Irish, that what would happen to their property values, their homes, if an interchange comes onto Irish. What we heard at our very first neighborhood meeting with the Greenfield neighborhood, and that's what the picture is here from January. We had a couple of different exercises with neighborhood residents, and their preference that came out of that meeting on January 4th was limited or no growth. It was pretty consistent here at the neighborhood. It was a well-attended neighborhood meeting. The steering committee is struggling with managing growth and understanding the need for growth, understanding the need for compact development. They generally preferred A or B of the variations that I've just shown. There is a preference for lower density housing. We heard that there's more interest with some more dense development at the northeast portion of the neighborhood. Very strong emphasis on preserving wetlands and farmland. We heard comments, no cookie cutter homes, yet there's a need for community and civic space, concerns for traffic, stormwater management, ecological health. People want to have improved bike lanes. Pedestrian safety is very important. Irish Lane is dangerous if you're trying to walk or bike. Concern with the rapid industrial urbanization of agricultural areas and existing neighborhoods, desire to maintain community character and culture, desire to expand the parks, and then we're still working through, as I mentioned, about the interchange. So I think that's a high level kind of what we're hearing from the community. And so that's why we're proposing to suggest to council maybe a couple more steering committee meetings, maybe an additional working group. The neighborhood is, in general, feeling like they're not being heard. That's what I would say.
Dave, I'm going to go Dave first and then Julia.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to follow up on Jay's comment. We got that rail corridor, and now basically it takes some take some material down to a cement plant in Oregon. The rail ends there, but it's got a lot of potential just to bring people, into Madison. I'd prefer they worked in Fitchburg, but it can get into Madison virtually nonstop, except for picking them up. The tracks go there. I think we should reevaluate that. The second point I wanted to make is I think it makes sense to have business or commercial development next to the residential. You all talk about sustainability all the time. The most sustainability is when you can walk to work. I grew up in a paper mill town. That most of the workers, lived within a mile of the paper mill, and they walk there in the morning. And so, if you have jobs where people can work close to where they live, I think they choose to do that. I don't think it serves our city at all to, in the morning, have all these residents, and some of them are going into Madison to work, and then at night, coming back. I think our city, as far as sustainability, is much better served by having businesses close to our where people live, so they don't have to travel. That's all.
Julia?
I have a question. Two questions. One is, okay, because do you think that having 2 or more meetings with this group or the steering committee and with the neighbors, will you accomplish something differently, first of all? Well, in the meantime, we are delaying the comp plan and all of that are more important, okay? So this is what I want to be, you will be candid with us, because I don't think you can have 100 more meetings and the result is going to be the same. They don't want anything there. They don't want growth, and we are doing this, and if we are doing this neighborhood plan only to approve low-density homes, I will say I am out of this. Let's stop this right now. Don't waste more time. And this is what I said. I want to know what you are trying to accomplish having more meetings with them. And what do you expect from us?
Yeah, because I think that's a great question. What we hope is that we could at least get to a point where our steering committee would support the plan. I don't think our steering committee is, in general, in support of the plan. Right.
But the other thing, even if they support any of these options, you already heard our comment that we are not 100% with some of these options, because we would like to see more density.
Yep,
You know what I mean? We like to see in the transit corridor more density, and here they say they don't want apartments. So, so this is what I say. I am confused with what you want to. Even though you have your steering committee approve one of the 3 options, I don't think that this body agree with any of the 3 options, the way they are currently designed. So that's it.
Okay.
I'm hoping we can wrap this up soon, so I'm hoping that anyone's comments can bring new things to the table. I know we've repaid a lot of things. Jay?
I think something to keep in mind, and even for the residents who live there, is that it's not like, as I mentioned earlier, it's not like we approve some neighborhood plan for Greenfield and then the next day there's bulldozers in the ground. Right. I mean, this is, right now, we're looking at Uptown, which still has probably, 250 or so acres that haven't even been started yet. So we're probably at least 10 years or so away from anything, maybe longer, maybe 20 years away from anything happening in this Greenfield plan. I mean, I appreciate the time we're taking to get planning done ahead of time, because that's always helpful. But, we had our comprehensive plan process when we originally did it in 2009 was an 18-month process. And there were, I don't know how many open houses that we had here, and so much discussion. And there were a lot of residents that were involved in that process. So, I mean, people may not like the direction it's headed when it gets close to them. But the bottom line is we're trying to keep consistent with the process and the goals and the ideas that were set forth in the comprehensive plan in 2009.
Very good.
Any additional comments? Anything else from Deanna? Do you want to? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate thanks for a great conversation.
Yeah,
we're going to
thank
bring
you.
Misty up here for our next agenda item, which is capital improvement plan and financial policies from our finance director, Misty Dodge. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you, everybody, for having me here tonight. So the purpose of this conversation is kind of a kickoff to our annual CIP process. I'm not going to get into what may or may not be included in the mayor's CIP when that comes out in a few weeks. I'm here more to talk about kind of the context and the terminology and things that we all need to know as we go into this process. So I included an agenda. So first, some overlying accounting fundamentals. And I guess I'm curious, should I speed through this stuff considering the late hour, or do you want the full presentation? Why don't I start there?
We want the full presentation.
I think we can move it on the more rapid end of the scale. I love the detail, but yeah.
I would agree. Given, I think we have only one new alder present, and I believe he's pretty competent in these types of processes from his board experience. So I would say rapid.
And if I'll recall correctly, both Alder Dantzler and Alder Vafadari have scheduled a meeting with you, correct? To kind of learn more about the finance processes?
Yep.
Excellent.
And I will still share the slide deck with all of you after this. So if you do want to review it on your own or you have questions, obviously I'm more than happy to meet with you and go through it again.
Thank you.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I will cruise through a lot of this. Couple pieces I really want to talk about, though, just because we only do this once a year, would be some terminology things. So general obligation notes. So general obligation means that when we borrow money, it is backed 100% by our ability to raise taxes, and the council commits to raising taxes, whatever we need to in order to pay that debt back. That's going to be important next week when we actually borrow money. I just want to make sure that general obligation phrase is clear. And then fund balance is going to be talked about in a little bit with our financial policies. So what fund balance is the difference between what the city owns and what the city owes. So it's similar to the equity you may have in your home, but it's a little bit of a different calculation because government accounting is different. But that fund balance piece is pretty key later on. And then property tax levy. So property tax levy is all of the money that we need to collect from all of the property taxes in order to pay for the city's budget. So when you go through the budget process in the fall, we'll say what level of service do we want to provide, how much will that cost, subtract out the other revenues, and then that difference is property tax levy. So that's then determined how to calculate that amount for what we need to collect based on individual property owners is using that assessed value tax rate. So we take the property's value, divide it by 1,000 and multiply it by that rate. So tax levy is the whole amount. Tax rate is how we proportion it out to all of the people. This is a chart from the budget that shows our city taxes on our average home. You can see that history. Same for multifamily apartments. Even though the tax bill isn't paid directly by the renters, it is indirectly included in the rent. So an important piece of this conversation. This is another page out of the budget that shows how that property tax bill is allocated to all of the different departments within the general fund and the other levy-funded funds. This is that property tax levy history, so the total amount that we need to collect. It does include the library, which was approved by referendum and conversations, which is the red bar, and then that light blue is the TID increment. So the next chart takes those two pieces out. So you can really look at kind of the main focus of our budget process going into it. The blue is the general fund, red is the debt service fund, and green is the capital projects. Overall, in the past 10 years, we've increased the total amount of taxes that we need to collect by 7.4% per year. That's split up in the general fund, which is the bulk of our operations, has been an average of 5.6% per year. Debt service has gone up 11.4% per year, and capital projects 26.3% per year over that same 10-year period. So you can see kind of how we've grown and changed throughout the last 10 years. There was a repeal of the personal property tax, so anybody that is a personal property tax owner know that this last tax bill you got is your last one. So that was a good change. Purpose of the annual budget, which again is going to be in the fall process, is to just determine how much we want to spend on what city services we want to provide. And so we'll go through that exercise and then also talk about how you want to fund them in order to get that property tax levy. But what we're going to kick off now is the CIP, or the capital improvement plan process. So this is different than the budget. When you pass the budget, you are basically saying, staff, here's the money, go ahead and do it within the purchasing guidelines. CIP is a planning document. So it's a 10-year document where we try to identify these big ticket projects that we plan to do. And then we can, have a better feeling for what our financial picture might look like over the next 10 years, including taxes, levy limits, debt amounts, all of those. So it's a way to really encourage council to look long-term rather than just what that next year is. So it's a very important process to make sure that we are keeping that focus on the long term and know what's coming. This is where I would like to talk a little bit about some context stuff. So it is a 10-year CIP. If you'll recall, the first 5 years are what I call the vetted projects, or the real projects. These are the ones where you've really given clear direction to council that you want us to work on these projects. There might be some tweaks and changes and things, but for the most part, yes, we want to do these. And then there's the back 5 years, years 6 through 10, which are placeholder projects. So these are not fully vetted. We likely can't afford all of them, if any of them, but they're just kind of there so people are aware that these other things are being talked about. And so as we go through this CIP process, really focus on those first 5 years. Those are the years that we need to make sure are balanced and that we can afford. Budget constraints. So when we go through both the CIP and the budget process, there's a couple of restrictions that council has that we have to make sure we keep in mind. First, of course, is the taxpayer ability and willingness to pay. So almost all of the money that the city spends is taxpayer money. So we just have to keep that in mind, that when we want to do more or want to increase the budget and taxes go up, the offsetting side of that is whether or not the taxpayers can or are willing to pay that additional amount. And when you look at the property taxes, we are only about a third of that total tax bill. There is the optional expenditure restraint incentive program. This is an optional program. It's designed for really larger communities to incentivize them to restrict their spending. It is a different calculation than what levy limits is, but it is an optional program. So I included here how that is calculated to determine if we qualify. We also have a very specific policy on how we apply that money because it is optional and it may go away at some point. So we want to make sure that we do that in a financially sustainable way. Included a history of that expenditure restraint payment that we've been receiving. You'll see we've been receiving it most of the past years, over the past 20 years. There's been a couple of years where we haven't for a variety of reasons. Some years it's really high. So like in 2022's budget, we got $750,000. That was a year when a lot of other municipalities didn't qualify. And so we benefited because we could qualify. And so we got more money because those communities backed out. And then the other one I want to point out is the budget for 2024. Under the purest sense of the rules, we did not qualify, but it we are going to get a payment still because the state included a hold harmless provision with the additional shared revenue. They said if you qualified last year, you're going to get the exact same thing this year, whether or not you would have qualified. So that's good for us for a couple reasons. One is we did spend more, so we wouldn't have qualified otherwise, but we also got the same dollar amount. So when we closed TID 6 and TID 4, which are two of our larger TIDs, our payment from the ERIP program is going to be quite a bit less. But because there was that hold harmless payment, we are still expecting to get $650,000 when it probably should have been $340,000. So I want to bring that up because in the CIP, we will talk about how we apply that money. And what's in there right now is a level funding of $650,000 from that ERP program. And as you can see, without that hold harmless, it would have been $340,000. So we are using fund balance in order to phase out of that piece of it. So that's an important thing to know. Bigger piece is going to, of course, be the state-imposed levy limits. This one is not optional. It is required under statute. It's also a dollar for dollar penalty. So if we go over levy limits by $1, the state will take $1 away from us. So there's really no incentive or reason to do it, even if it wasn't illegal. The bulk of the calculation is based off of net new construction. So at first glance, it seems like that seems reasonable. As your community grows, you have net new construction, new buildings, new value. You should be able to increase your budget for that. So at first glance, it looks like if you can get 2 to 3% net new construction and your costs go up 2 to 3%, it seems to be pretty even. But that's not exactly how it works. First, in order to get even 2% of net new construction, it's over $100 million. 3% is $172 million of new value. So that's a lot of new buildings that are coming on and likely a lot of new residents that are going to require services that are coming on, even to get to the baseline amount. And then on the inflation side, 2 to 3% in the long run may be reasonable, but as I'm sure you've seen in your home budgets, that doesn't seem to be what we're experiencing right now. So that is also too low considering this current environment that we're in.
Jay, you have a question?
Yeah, just to add on to this, every year 2 or 3% of net new construction gets more and more and more because we have more and more and more stuff. So it's an unsustainable formula. It basically relies on, the notion that growth in a community is unlimited.
Agreed. And so what we actually see is this kind of unbalanced seesaw. So we have a lot of value that we need to get on just to get that 2 to 3%, but then we have additional inflationary pressures, plus we have those additional needs that need to be addressed because of that new value. So it's really this lopsided seesaw that we're experiencing. And in working with the city assessor, our current estimate going into the 2025 budget is 1.9% for net new construction. We may have a little bit more movement upward, but if we hit 2%, I will be very happy. So putting that into context as we go into both CIP and budget time, inflation will eat up that 2% really fast. So I wanted to provide an example real quick about, again, that flaw, and I know I'm probably beating a dead horse, but wanted to explain, why levy limits really is flawed in our situation. So this is a hypothetical example. We have $1 million budget. The city's budget is about 70% personnel, because we're at our heart a service provider, and 30% of other expenses. So you can see we started $1 million in year one, and with a 5% assumption in personnel and a 3% assumption in other expenditures, you can see how that grows over those 10 years. And so this orange line is that same bar, just in a line version. And then if your revenues are flat, let's say we had no net new construction, which a lot of municipalities are in right now, you can see that gap may not be insurmountable in year one, but grows really, really fast by the time you get to those 10-year marks. We do have 2% net new construction that we're hoping for, which is better than 0%. But even in that situation, you can see that we really quickly start to not be able to afford even just the status quo. And again, that doesn't include any of the additional services or additional cost that will be incurred in order to provide services to those new property owners.
Question. So this is net new, right? So if we're doing the responsible thing by doing infill development and we demo a building and replace it with something better, rather than doing greenfield sprawl, we're kind of being punished.
Correct, it is net new. So if you build something new, you have to back out from the value what was there before.
Yeah.
So in our example, net new construction has been pretty favorable. A lot of my peers have been very jealous of our net new construction. But again, just to reiterate, a lot of that net new construction growth that we've had have gone to status quo increases and have not been able to allow the city to keep up with those increased demands. So while it may look like we're in a great spot having high net new, it actually makes it even harder for us to comply with the levy limits. And then I talk here about that flaw again. We are going to get one additional TID closure adjustment, so TID 15, which was the former Town of Madison TID that came over. We closed that. We're going to get about a $225,000 levy limit adjustment for that. $120,000 of it has already been planned for in the last CIP that was adopted. So there's a little bit of cushion there, but not a lot. And then I included some resources. Another new budget constraint is the public safety maintenance of effort. So when the state provided us that additional shared revenue money last year, it came with a lot of strings, but one of the big ones is this maintenance of effort requirement. The rules came out very recently. I haven't had a chance to fully evaluate how we want to certify. That puts us in the best position going forward. But at least we don't have to worry about it in the near term because we do know that we're growing, our public safety services are growing, and our costs are growing. So I have no concern that we will meet maintenance of effort, but I just want to make sure that we are doing it in the way that sets us up for the future as well.
So before you go off that slide, why does police and fire have different qualifications?
That is based off of the state legislature's requirements.
Yeah, did they provide any explanation for that, or?
So the only, I guess, theory that I know, so it is tied, it was a requirement in order for that additional shared revenue to come to us. They said, okay, but we need you to commit that you're going to maintain the cost of those two public safety services. And in order to get that deal done, there was a faction of the legislature that really wanted to encourage municipalities to spend that money on public safety. And so these were the ways that they identified how they will evaluate whether or not we maintained our public safety services. So other than that, I don't know what the rationale was.
I see.
And when we use the phrase public safety, we don't mean anything that makes the public safer. We mean specific things, right? It's got to be PD and FD.
And EMS.
And EMS, yeah.
Yep.
So it can't be like things that are preventative.
Nope, this is strictly speaking about police, fire, and EMS. So again, I don't think that this will be a problem for us, at least not in the next handful of years, because we are having expanded services, but wanted to at least point that out as it is a constraint that we need to make sure we are complying with. We then have a variety of financial policies that the city has adopted. The last time we adopted it was 2012, so it has been a while since we've looked at them, but we look at them every year as part of this presentation, as well as part of our financial management plan, which is when Ellers will be out at the next committee of the whole to talk about these. And they are based on basically guardrails, right, to make sure that we are being financially responsible and have those kind of guardrails in those decision-making processes. A lot of it comes down to Moody's. So we did have our Moody's call last week. We will find out tomorrow what our Moody's rating is. But this is the report from last time we borrowed in 2021, which Moody's is that third-party credit rating agency that says how likely it is that we will pay our money back. And so the more positives that Moody's sees in us from a financial perspective, the more comfort the market has in lending us money, which then means that we pay less in interest because they're more confident that they'll get their money back. I will say the other benefit of this is that kind of headline risk, right? So we can go to the public and say we are a AA1, which is the second from the highest, which means that we are doing a lot of things really right. So in here, it does talk about the rationale for the rating that we got. things that could lead to an upgrade, and things that could lead to a downgrade. And again, this is from 2021. We'll see what the report tomorrow says.
Can I ask you a quick question? Madison had gotten a downgrade sometime in the last 8 or 10 years. Are they still at an AA1 or have they gone back up to AAA?
I am not sure, but I can look that up on Emma. It'll be out there.
Actually, from 2021, it lists them as AAA stable, just in your slide there.
Look at that.
Yep. And right in the pink section at the top there in the ratings rationale, it actually references the city of Madison and has its bond rating there, at least from the date of this report.
Right. So the first financial policy, and I think we have 10 of them, the first one is the one that we talk about the most, which is that we will maintain 15 to 25% of our unassigned fund balance, or essentially our rainy day fund, our emergency fund. We will keep within our balances. This helps us if there are unexpected events that happen, or if we have cash flow that we need to make sure things go out at the time. As of the end of 2023, that landed at 25.1%. So we are just outside of our policy on the top end, which is a great place to be. That is a pretty substantial decrease from last year, and that's because the council has been very strategically and intentionally spending down that fund balance through the CIP process. So that did cause a big drop, and when we had our Moody's presentation, we explained that very thoroughly, that it was intentional, it was planned for, and there was a reason why we felt that it was responsible.
So earlier you had said that the general fund is what we have minus what we owe. So how do you distinguish that from what makes up the undesignated and unreserved portion of that difference between what we have and what we owe? Are we talking about like future liabilities, or what is that?
Yep. So the general fund is the main fund, so the main set of books that the city has for the bulk of our things. And then there's fund balance within the general fund. So fund balance is the difference between what we owe and what we have. Within there are 5 different categories of how we classify our fund balance. There is non-spendable, which is money that we can't actually spend in the future. So things like prepaid expenses or advances to other funds, things that we can't easily turn into cash, is non-spendable. There's restricted, so things that have an outside restriction on it. The one that we have is the money housed at the Madison Community Foundation is restricted. We can't spend it on whatever we want. We can only spend it on certain things. Then there's committed fund balance, which is the council decides through a very formal process that we're going to set this money aside for something in the future. And then there's assigned fund balance, which is the council deciding on a slightly more informal process that they're setting money aside, and I have a slide in a little bit that talks about those different categories. And then whatever the difference is your unassigned. So that leftover things, after you said this is how much we have, these are all the things we have in these other categories. Whatever's left, that's the unassigned that this policy is talking about.
Okay, so it's what we have minus what we owe minus everything we've earmarked.
Exactly.
Okay.
Much more succinct answer, yes. So this is the chart out of the audit presentation that the Finance Committee will have next week. Again, if you're interested in hearing from the auditors about our results, you're more than welcome to either attend the meeting or watch it on FACTv. But these are some sneak previews into what will be in that presentation. And so again, you can see that we were up pretty high, but we intentionally spent that down, and now we're at the 25.1%. And so on here, I talk about those other assignments. So we do have that shared revenue assigned, which was part of that policy of the 1.5 million, though we don't assign fund balance or earmark fund balance for all of the state aids. It's just the shared revenue amount. And then we have those other assignments. So the biggest ones would be the employee retirement reserve, and then that use of fund balance in future years for the CIP is also on here. Policy number 2. This is that we will have a tax rate for debt purposes, like repayment of debt, at $2.25 or less per $1,000 of equalized value. You can think of this as like your mortgage payment. We were at 94 cents per $1,000 of EV with the 2024 budget, and once we borrow the money that we're doing next week, it'll be at about 97 cents for 2025.
That's including like half of the police state facility money, right?
It's only 10 million of
Okay.
the police facility.
So about a quarter of it.
Yeah. Policy number 3 is that we want to match our revenues and our expenses. Ultimately, if we have another funding source that's going to be repaying the debt instead of property taxes, we want to try to time that with those payments of debt as well as we can. It's important from a cash flow purpose, and you don't want to pay too much in interest if it's not needed, and we met that for the end of the year. There's a policy about cash financing equipment and road maintenance using either property tax levy or expenditure restraint funds. It's important because the more money you borrow, the more money you have to pay back, not just paying back the money, but also the cost to issue it and the interest on that money that you borrow. And so we are currently operating under a $500,000 threshold for new projects that we consider to be legacy projects, are the ones that we'll consider borrowing for. We have finally completed the phasing off of road maintenance borrowing. That was a 20-year, I think, plan of the council of phasing out of that. 2023 was the last year, so we are no longer borrowing for routine road maintenance, which is fantastic. And then also using that replacement fund strategy, which I'll touch on at the end. Number 5 is about how much outstanding debt we can have at any point in time. State statute limits us to 5%. City policy is 3% to give us a little bit of cushion in case there's unexpected events or there's something that changes our values, say a housing bubble and our value drops so much. We need to make sure we still comply with state statute. Our actual as of the end of the year was 0.98%, which is about a third of what our city policy is. And it's projected to go up to 1% once we include the debt that we're issuing currently. Number 6 is how much of our total budget are we spending on debt payments, and we say that will be between 15 and 25%. It's important because if it's too high, it means we're too leveraged. We're spending too much of our money on debt. And the 2024 budget is 15.3%. So again, right within that range. Debt payment structure and duration. This is mostly about, the payments that we make on the debt, that we want to have relatively even payments. We don't want to have big balloon payments 10 years from now that, we're not planning for. It's important because you don't want to kick that can down the road. We want to make sure that we're staying on pace with our debt. And our current actual is 64% in 10 years of our total debt is going to be paid off. So that is a good amount. Borrowing for TID district stuff. We want to make sure that we only borrow for TID projects if we know that there's going to be TID money coming back in to pay for it. Because at the end of the TID, if the TID is unsuccessful, all of that burden comes onto the city only. It is not shared with the overlying jurisdictions. If the TID is successful, we share it. If the TID is unsuccessful, it's just ours. So when we borrow for TID projects, we want to make sure that that money can be paid back with TID money and not have to put that on the property tax levy non-TID parcels. We do have some TID debt outstanding for Seminole and Lacey, so the roundabout and Lacey Road, the Fish Hatchery Road project, we did borrow quite a bit for, and then the Uptown Road project that we did a couple years ago. All 3 of those were borrowed for, but we did make sure that the full amount is expected to be repaid by the TID.
Don't we require pay-go agreements for all of our TIDs?
Not absolutely everything. So for the most part, yes. Developer incentives, yes. But when there's a large district-wide infrastructure project like Lacey Road or Fish Hatchery Road, that the city does.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. The utilities, we don't have a formal policy for them, but we should be proud that our utilities do not currently have any debt. That is a way that we are able to keep our rates relatively low, especially compared to our peers. The one exception is in the CIP, you'll see some stormwater projects that are likely going to have to be borrowed for in the future.
We have a water tower coming up too.
That's almost all water impact fees. So we've been collecting impact fees from new development, and that will pay for, I think, all of the water tower. Number 9 is land use and growth. So similar to what Deanna was just here talking about, we want to make sure that we are encouraging new growth and development as a means to expand the tax base, but only if it conforms with the city's master land use plan. Growth is good, but it has to be good growth. It's important from a financial perspective because new growth is a larger tax base, which in general is more property owners to spread the costs across. But you already had this conversation that there are costs of the new infrastructure that's put in with that growth too, and we do need to balance that. And then the last policy is the maintenance and enhancement of our credit rating. So we are currently a AA1. It's just one notch below what the best of the best is, that AAA. But we do have a policy that says we are committed to at least maintaining our AA1 and are always working towards that AAA, making sure that we have a good relationship with the credit agencies and others.
Now, when we had been at AA2 for a long freaking time.
Mm-hmm.
And we were told back in the day, because when I first got elected, we were like an AB or something really bad because of some of the bad decisions that had been made by previous administrations. So we worked it up. We got to the AA3, and then we got to AA2. That was one of the last things that happened before I left office. And we were told that the thing that was keeping us from AA1 was there were two things, because Moody's always gave us this comparison of what they viewed as peer communities, and one of the things that they said was that our valuation, our total overall valuation, was like $3.6 billion at the time, and they said, if you had more valuation, they'd look at that more favorably. But the other thing, there was I think it was New Berlin, or may have been someone else, but New Berlin.
Jay, let's move it along. We're really late.
Okay.
Yeah.
New Berlin
get to the question.
New Berlin had the fund balance of about 40%, which is where we were. And so now that we've spent that down, do you anticipate that there's going to be any issue with this, or is that something that could potentially be keeping us from getting to the AAA?
So Moody's has changed their scorecard twice now since the last time you recall, and that scorecard is how the metrics that they look at. And when we get the report tomorrow, it'll include some of those metrics on there, and we'll be sure to share that with all of you so you can see exactly what Moody's said. The value in total is not really an indicator anymore. It feeds into some of the calculations, but that on its own is not a factor necessarily in the AAA. And then I had a conversation today about New Berlin. The bigger reason why they are a AAA is because they have unused levy capacity. So they have like $2 million of levy limit capacity that they aren't tapping into, which is where we were 10 years ago, but we are not there anymore. So overall, I think we made a really strong case to Moody's. I think we've got a lot of really strong financial indicators. The spending down to fund balance, I'm not concerned with. I feel like we explained that really well to Moody's. I think because it was intentional and strategic, and we've been talking about it for many years now, and it's all been documented, I don't think that will harm us.
In the interest of time, let's take notes on questions and ask Misty afterward. Thanks, Misty.
No problem. Included in here some other resources in case you're curious. How does Fitchburg compare financially to other municipalities? The Wisconsin Policy Forum has a lot of great resources, as does the State of Wisconsin Department of Revenue has some great resources out there if you wanted to see kind of our financials and what they look like within ourselves, but then also how we compare to other communities. CIP process and next steps. So the revised CIP was approved when you passed the 2024 budget, so that's kind of our starting point. The department heads have put together their recommendations in April, and we are now working with the mayor to determine how she wants to proceed with the different projects in the mayor's proposed CIP. That comes out June 7th. It's about 2.5 weeks from now. If there are any changes between the last adopted CIP by the council and the mayor's proposed CIP, we do delineate those specifically in the mayor's letter, so you'll be able, or in the report, so you'll be able to see very clearly what has changed. And then also if there's any changes from the investment plan, those would be called out as well. Once the mayor's proposal comes out, we will have the department head presentations. There's a special finance committee meeting that all of you are welcome and hope you attend to learn about those projects from the department heads. And then at the next committee of the whole, we'll do the financial plan, our financial management plan review with Ellers. They'll take that information and project out our policies over the next 10 years. Council will then have an opportunity to submit amendments, so things that you want to see changed, dollar amounts changed, projects added, projects removed, timing changed, all those things. I'll provide a form for you to complete to share those ideas. We will compile them into a packet, and then council will go through those amendments one by one on the council floor. I'll remind you there are no amendments on the floor allowed, so only things that are talked about in a council proposed amendment can actually be changed in the document. We don't want to take new ideas off the floor because those haven't had a chance to be vetted, not just by staff, but by the public also. We want them to know what's being discussed so that it doesn't feel like there's any sneak attacks in there. Then we'll adopt the CIP on July 23rd. And then the first year goes automatically into the first draft of the mayor's proposed, or the first draft of the budget that goes to the mayor, but the mayor does have the authority to make changes. If she does, she will have to specifically identify those in the letter. Again, so everybody is aware what has changed since the last adopted version. I do have some slides about replacement funds. I will skip through those. I know you and I are going to meet in a little bit, so we'll talk about them. I'm assuming the rest of you are familiar with why these are being used, why they've been a great financial tool for us, and what the benefits are. One big difference that you'll see when it comes out is the building systems replacement funds were a general number that we've just been inflating. With this next CIP, we plan to have a better inventory of what those specific systems are to get a more exact cost. And then there's some additional replacement funds that we're hoping to include, like additional tennis courts that I know has been a conversation at the council level. And that is it.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Go.
Regarding the replacement fund, I think we need to create a policy because so far we don't have a policy, and I think having a policy is good for the mayor when future mayors to decide what are those safeguards with the replacement fund, or what are the asset that they require a replacement fund, and what is the amount when it starts, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So far we don't have that, and for me it has been confusing sometimes, and sure. I would like to see if we can have, the council can put together a policy.
Yeah, I don't think it's realistic to expect that with this CIP process, but it's something we can look at for the next one. Yeah. I think what you're saying is that you just want it to be a more formal policy.
Oh, yes.
Because the council, through the adoption of the CIP, has kind of set those parameters, but it's been more informal, and you want to see something that's more formally adopted. Yeah. And then I mentioned too, the financial policies we talked about are all still very, very valid, but it's been a while since we did an official resolution authorizing those, so that's something we can look at for the future too, as resources allow.
Oh, the other thing I want to mention to all of you is Lisa sent you an email inviting you to meet with me to discuss the CIP, and also I'm going to share with you guys what the new project that I put in the CIP. You have questions about the CIP. And remember, if you're bringing a new project as an amendment to the CIP, you need to find also the money, okay? So it's not like, I have this great idea, I'm going to put it in the CIP. Yeah, no, you need to bring the whole proposal, okay? Or you need to remove all the project to make room for this project. So, and before you do that, talk to the head of the department, okay? So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Misty.
Of course. Thank you for your time.
Announcements. Next committee of the whole meeting
I have
is...
one too.
Oh, yes.
When you're done.
Next committee of the whole meeting is June 26th. We have just a quick announcement about Memorial Day observance. Monday, May 27th at 12:30 p.m. That's this Monday at Veterans Memorial Park. There will be a ceremony, and the mayor will be speaking, and the theme is the people behind the heroes. Jed?
I just wanted to briefly thank our police, fire, highway, parks, maintenance, and our communications folks for their efforts beginning last night as well as all day today, and with the severe weather that went through. So we have a great team of dedicated folks who are out and about last night and working diligently both last night and today, and we'll continue to do so in the coming days to help clean up from the storms. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Can I get a motion to adjourn? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 9:46 p.m.